So the current crisis of the dominant models of governance raise epistemological, conceptual, and cultural questioning, and it offers us a golden opportunity to revisit and explore other experiences of sociability and governmentability that are generally rejected in the category of outdated tradition. So beyond the practical aspect of governance, such as the modality of decision-making, conflict regulation, or resource sharing, the study of indigenous knowledge on governance help us better understand other dimensions of socio-political structures, such as the cosmogonic relationship and the influence attributed to the invisible world. Yeah, so behind any type of governance, there are driving metaphysical, spiritual, and philosophical interpretation which frame the political ontology of each society and inform us about the response they given to the primordial question of who is authorized to speak for the people, for the divinity, and for the ancestors. A system of governance does not only regulate conflicting ambitions, force, and interests within society, it has also to deal with the transcendental quest of people. So, in other words, governance is a part only of a large system of interpretation, interactions, and processes which define not only the nature of relationship between humans, but also with other living and non-living entities. So the current shortcoming of the dominant model invite us to get out of the Eurocentric perspective of good governance and develop a more pluralistic reflection on the experience and practices of governmentality in different societies in order to identify similarities and commonalities, compare their ethical, spiritual, and socio-economical foundation, and identify principles and practices and processes that could be revalorized and operationalized in view to respond to the current crisis. So in my presentation here, I wish to analyze an indigenous system of governance developed by the Somali pastoralists in the Horn of Africa, which constitute, in my view, a concrete example of relational process. So this system is it's known as the Xeer Issa, or Issa Xeer, is at the basis of what is called the Pastoral Democracy of Somali people. It is really a very complex system of institution, rules, and regulation with three main and interlinked components. One is it is a political constitution, it is a penal code, and it is a social code of conduct. The Xeer as a political constitution define the distribution of power and the process of decision-making between four different bodies. And here I just show this very quickly. The Gudi is the assembly of wise or of a body of judge with a very large set of power. As the supreme organ of the system, the Gudi plays the triple role of parliament, of court of justice, and of law enforcement. It has to deal with the social, political, and economic matter regarding the community. It is composed of 44 members chosen as follows: 24 representatives from the 12th clan of the Confederation, according to the ratio of 2 representatives per clan, and then 20 other members selected by the 24 on the basis of their wisdom, moral integrity, and knowledge. The second institution is called the Gende. It plays the triple role of constitutional court, supreme court, and training institution. It is interesting here to note that when the member of this institution, assembly, finish their term, they became advisor and they became trainer for the newcomer for the new elders who have to play that role. The third institution or body of the system is the ugas, or the king. Of course, he is the spiritual father of the community. Like in constitutional monarchy, he must facilitate the decision-making process and bless the decision taken. He's given three types of role. He's the role of guardian of unity and consensus. He plays, for instance, he's an arbiter in conflict between members of the community. He plays a spiritual a role of political leader, and then he have to embody and promulgate the decision taken by the assemblies. And then he plays the role of a spiritual leaders because he is asked to pray for his people and to use his magical force to call for rain, for instance, and protect them against external calamities. The four bodies is the Melih, or the military chief. During war or imminent threat facing the community, the Xeer system bestows full authorities and leadership on a military chief selected by the elders on the basis of his military and strategic ability. And during such a state of emergency, the function of other institutions are limited and some disposition of the Xeer are suspended. And the commander-in-chief, he decides on the displacement of the communication, the distribution of duty, and during this period, he is allowed to sidestep the usual process of democratic decision-making. The Xeer can also be play the role of a penal court, and as such, there is four aspects of this penal code. One is the Xeer of the blood, to protect the physical integrity of individual. We have also the Xeer of property, which protect the private and collective property. And we have the Xeer of honor, to protect the prestige, dignity of individual and group. And finally, and this is very interesting, there is a Xeer with others, which institute the rules of war, of peace with neighboring communities and with the foreigner. The main characteristic of the penal code is that it's a very highly technical codification of the different offense and crimes, an extreme detailed table of compensation, mostly in cattle, camels or sheep, a complex procedures for investigation, hearing of witnesses, and confrontation of argument to ensure a fair trial, and finally, elaborate ritual ceremony to facilitate the acceptance of verdicts, the reconciliation, and to prevent the future of a future conflict. The Xeer, as a social code of conduct, define a series of rules, precepts, and tradition to regulate here the collective and individual behavior between members of this community, the civic education, promotion and defense of the Xeer, the ritual of communication with ancestors and spirits, and finally, the relationship with nature, living and non-living living beings. After this brief presentation of this holistic system, I wish to discuss now some principles and practices that could contribute to our debate on relational governance. But before doing that, allow me to question a preconception about traditional social political organization, often understood as static systems that were put in place once for all and at a certain stage of the development of pre-modern society. This linear perspective of the trajectory of human society generally presumes that society go from the simplest to the most complex, from the most segmented to the most organic or state-based. The emergence of the hair in the 16th century in the Horn of Africa contradicts this belief. This system was elaborated to respond to the socio-political crisis that happened in the Horn of Africa in a century during which the existing state power structure of the region, particularly the Muslim sultanate of the commercial city-state, fell in decadence. People who lived in this society escaped the cities, established in the countryside, and built other type of organized society based on pastoralism and on common ownership of land and water. So the hair is a direct product of the collapse of a certain worldview during a period marked by conflict, fear, mistrust, with events very similar to what we are witnessing today in some region in the world, like the Middle East, the Horn of Africa, or even some countries like in Somalia. Increase of insecurity in cities, emergence of authoritarian regimes, instrumentalization of religious for political legitimization, migratory movement of population in the whole region, and finally the spread, and it's very interesting, of pandemics like such cholera at that period. So it is a response to a declining form of citizenship developed in the autonomous city-state around the commercial ties, political consensus, security interest, and religious belief. And it replaced this form of citizenship by an alternative ethical, social, and political affiliation that laid the foundation for a new confederation of communities. So the Hair invited a new form of relational process which mitigate the traditional blood-based kinship and transform it into a law-based relationship by using the symbolic representations of the blood affiliation. It creates what I call a confederation of family united around the existentialist defense of the rule of law. A precept shows this relation between blood and law, which says, make testimony against your brother. Make testimony against your brother if he is wrong, but don't forget to contribute to the payment of his fine. The primacy accorded to the rule of law by the Xeer community led them to recognize also the universality of human rights, as illustrated by this other precept of the system, which says, fight against the foreigner and the enemy, but recognize them that they have also rights. So the Hair was not only adapted to the cultural specificity of nomadic people by using, for instance, cattle as currency, it is also built on the cosmogonic views by integrating their metaphysics of number, spiritual beliefs in the representation of the law. For instance, the assembly are divided in 44, 12, 6, and they use this symbolic of number to really interiorize the law, the rule of law in the beliefs of the people. So this system also, which integrates people's metaphysics, is also based on a very elaborated conceptual framework to explain its coherence. During my research, I was really astonished by the discourses developed by the elders I interviewed, in particular, the theoretical articulation they used to justify the institutional coherence of the system. And this reinforced my hypothesis about the fact that the founder of the Hair was very familiar with different systems of law and governance, and that they elaborate the one who really fits their own needs and culture. They integrated, for instance, some element of Islamic jurisdiction that and adopted it to their context, to the context of the Somali pastoral societies. And this capacity of reinterpretation of Islamic laws is very interesting as compared to the current fundamentalistic interpretation of Islam, which rejected the cultural diversity of indigenous heritage in today's Muslim societies. So allow me now to discuss 4 characteristics of the Xeer from which we could draw some lessons for our discussion on the relational governance. The first point concerns the balance between individual rights and collective duty. In the Xeer, the individual is given freedom of expression, of movement, and of initiative. However, each individual is hemmed in a web of solidarity and social obligation that reduce his freedom of action, but also his individualism and his capacity to do harm to the community. His social action is regulated and mediated by intermediary institutions such as the dia-paying groups, age groups, or initiation brotherhood. Before expressing or claiming their rights, individuals are expected to consult their peers from their different network, explain their choice, verify the legitimacy of their request, and eventually obtain the group's consent. This constant request of group validation and approval is an educational process which helps them to learn about the dialectics between individual rights and collective obligation, to learn how to debate, how to build consensus in compliance with the common interest. If an individual persists to make personal choices that are not compatible with the collective obligation, he may lose group's consideration, protection, and solidarity. So in our modern society, the rise of individualism as an autonomous entity enjoying political and legal status pose a challenge to societies and to the living together. The weakening of intermediary collective mediators such as the peer groups, religious communities, trade unions, and other forms of regrouping makes that individuals are confronted alone to the edifice of laws and regulation. The necessity to respond to the increasing diversity of individuals' claim for the exercise of their rights make the legal and institutional system more and more complex. Consequently, individuals became more and more lost in the jungle of rules and regulation and need some kind of interpreters to understand how to define their rights. As this service is generally not free, only those who can afford and hire lawyers or legal advisors to augment their chance to win can navigate. Therefore, certain citizens are deprived from the rights they are supposed to enjoy equally. This reality has an important impact on governance. The second point I would like to raise here is the consensual process of decision-making. The Xeer established the principle of inclusion, representation, and participation as the fundamental pillar of the system. The decisions are taken only when a large consensus is reached, and the whole process is based on the principle of equality. The ritualization of the process facilitates the interiorization of this representation and participation and prevent their transgression. The Xeer does not apply, for instance, the majority rule in its mode of representation and its decision-making process. It privileges the direct and collegial participation and decision-making. To that end, it offers the legal possibility to pass through 12 courts or trees or appeals in order to maximize the chance for consensus. But as soon as a decision is taken, the application engages the honor and the credibility of those who took it. The Xeer has neither a mechanism of coercion nor or to enforce its decision, nor prison or death penalty to punish those violating the law. Its great legitimacy is based on strong ownership and a deep awareness of the necessity and utility of the system by the member of the community. Knowledge of the law is inculcated from an early age in all members of the community through civic education programs in the form of tales, proverbs, games, poetry, as well as through the ritual of initiation. From the age 15, every young man is encouraged to attend the deliberation of the assemblies to train himself for his future role as an active member of the community.
Ali, we need to wind down pretty soon, all right?
Law enforcement is ensured through ethical, moral, and transcendental codes of conduct based on the value of honor, respectability, and on the fear of the communal, ancestral, and divine judgment. There is no centralized power to lead or control this process. The decision-making is fully decentralized in the territory of the Confederation, which is divided in 12 trees or circumscription, each having its own council and the same kind of power. This process of decision-making and the way in which knowledge and respect of the rule of law is inculcated and interiorized could be of interest in the effort of building a relational governance in our modern societies. We can learn a lot from such indigenous practice to enhance ownership of law, trust in the process of lawmaking, and enforcement of civic responsibilities. The third characteristic of the Xeer system that I think of interest for me is the neutralization, what I call how to neutralize and civilize the power. For instance, the Xeer is symbolized by the figure of Ugas. Despite the sacralization of his position, the Ugas does not exercise power. He's confined in the symbolic and magic sphere without being granted any legislative, executive, or judicial power. Burdened by the numerous obligations, the Ugas is not given any room for coercion to impose his agenda. It is through this kind of limitation that the Xeer managed to neutralize the temptation of royal power towards absolutism. The founder of the Xeer has even anticipated the inherent risk of the designation of an empowerment of the king among those pretender to the kingship. The title of Ugas is neither hereditary to avoid competition among the descendants, nor elective to discourage competition among the different clans of the Confederation. The Ugas is chosen so by the elders among the young people, and after a long observation during which all kinds of knowledge like astrology, divination, dream interpretation are used. So this is the. I'm going to conclude, and the food here. Sorry, do you see the screen? Yeah, and the last one is what I call the mutual solidarity, and it's also a way of how to bring individuals to be in a net of mutual solidarity. That's very important, and the dia paying group is one of that. And finally, I think what is very interesting also is to see how the Xeer consider the minority group and give them a role in the process of election, in the process of decision making, through a series of rituals. So to conclude, I would like to highlight the importance today for African countries confronted with the failure of imported political model, the importance to question and put in perspective all methods and tools of this model, such as the rule of majority, the separation of power, the secret vote, and the ballot system. We should stop asking the same wrong question about the reason of this failure by focusing our analysis on the capacity of African society to assimilate, digest, and use this system of democracy presented as a universal model. So only such rethinking and reconceptualization can facilitate the necessary paradigm shift, which would allow to revisit indigenous knowledge and experience and build what I call endogenous solution for the serious governance problem that we are facing today.